It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this morning, our good friend Red Steagall. Red's recording and songwriting career has spanned the globe for the last 45 years. He has received numerous recognitions for his art. In 1991, Red was selected by the Texas State Legislature as the official cowboy poet of Texas. In 2006, that same legislative body selected Red as the Poet Laureate. In 2003, he was inducted into the Hall of Great Westerners at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. And in 2004, he was inducted into the Texas Cowboy Hall of Fame, receiving the prestigious Spirit of Texas Award. 2 years later, in 2006, Red was presented the Charles Goodnight Award. This award personifies the ideals of the Old West. He still performs from 40 to 60 days a year and is the host of Cowboy Corner, a nationally syndicated radio show broadcast on 170 radio stations. He also hosts his own television show, In the Bunkhouse. I know many of you watch that on RFD-TV. He has owned American quarter horses for most of his life, including Bandito Gold, the High Point Western Pleasure Horse of 1979. We asked Red to welcome us to Texas at our convention last year, and he received such a tremendous response. Before he left the stage, we asked him to come back this year and be our guest speaker. Please welcome a true friend of the Western Heritage and a true friend of AQHA, Red Steagall.
Don, thank you so much. I am so proud to be here, and I don't suppose I could have any greater honor than to be invited back the second time to be your keynote speaker. I don't know what that says, except that I'm really honored. And I do love quarter horses, and I do love the West, and I'm proud to be associated with all of you. I was thinking this morning, something happened last week that I ought to let you in on. Gail and I were sitting on the back porch having a glass of wine, one of those warm spring evenings, and all of a sudden she said, "I can't imagine 1 minute of my life without you." And I thought, how sweet is that? And I said, "Is that you or the wine talking?" She said, "It's me, and I'm talking to the wine." Yeah. She's not really that mean, y'all. In fact, she doesn't even drink wine. But I've had the great pleasure for the last 19 years to interview people who have a vested interest in the preservation of our Western lifestyle. And I've interviewed some of the most unbelievable people. An awful lot of them are gone. But we got their story down in their words and in their voice. And I interviewed 3 cowboys: Boots O'Neill, the late Frankie McWhorter, and Jiggs Mann, who all 3 went to work on the J.A. Ranch in the bottom of the Palo Duro Canyon when they graduated from high school. They all 3 told me the same stories. They had the same beginning and the same ending, but the middle was different. The reason the middle was different is because they interpreted what they saw through 3 different sets of eyes and 3 different minds. Each one of us has our own story. Our own stories about the horses that we raise and why we raise them and what bloodlines we look for and what characteristics we treasure in one of those quarter horse animals. If we don't get our story down while we're here, our story is gone forever, because we have the only one of its kind on the face of this earth. They all 3 told me the same joke. And in about 1941, it might have been pretty risque. A cowboy probably wouldn't have told this story in polite company. And I told it last summer at a big resort in Montana, and I didn't even get a giggle. Then I realized after it was all over, they were from downtown Chicago and New York City. They didn't savvy bar ditch and bob wire and dirt tank. But all 3 of these guys told me the same story. It had the same beginning, the same ending, and the same middle. This cowboy rides up on the dam of a dirt tank, and down in that tank is a beautiful girl taking a bath. and her clothes are hanging on a mesquite bush on the bank, and he just locks up. He can't move. He can't gig his horse. He can't talk. He can't do nothing. He just sits there. She looked up at him. She said, "You're horrible." He couldn't answer. There was a number 3 wash tub in that tank. She picked it up by the ears, held it up above the water, and stood up behind it, looked over the top of that tub, and she said, "You want to know what I think?" And he said, "What do you think?" She said, "I think you're the most despicable human being I've ever seen in my life." He said, "You don't know what I think?" She said, "What do you think?" He said, "I think that you think that I think there's a bottom in that tub." I love cowboy stories, and I've had such a wonderful time with Cowboy Corner and in the Bunkhouse on RFD-TV, and I am so proud that the American Quarter Horse Association is one of our primary sponsors now. I really treasure that. The American Quarter Horse is the most popular breed of horse in the United States and the largest breed registry in the world. The American Quarter Horse is known as a racehorse, a working cow horse in rodeos and on the ranches, a competitor in reining, cutting, and working cow horse classes, English discipline, driving, and just plain pleasure riding. How'd we get to this point? To take one animal, one breed, that can do all those things and satisfy almost anybody's desire to use a horse. We got here by very selective breeding over a period of 100 years. From the blood of the thoroughbred, the steel dust and copper bottom horses, and the strength and savvy of the horses left here by the Spanish, we have taken the best of all our equine ancestors to develop the quarter horse that we know today. Since we started breeding horses in this part of the world, there have been individuals who have made a difference, who have a genetic makeup that is beneficial to its offspring and is passed on for future generations. The best example I can give you of one individual horse was Justin Morgan. And those genetic traits dictated by the blood of Justin Morgan are still treasured in that registry. In South Texas, the sturdy build of the steel dust and copper bottom horses crossed on the blood of Peter McHugh mares were making a real difference in the ranching community. When the AQHA was formed in Fort Worth, Bob Denhart said, "We doubted if there were over 300 horses of the type we wanted to register in Texas, and probably less than 1,000 in the entire country." Bob said we were trying to preserve a nearly extinct line. We misjudged what the future would hold. The men and women who formed this association at that time, the future depended on these men and women dedicated to perpetuating and preserving a very unique and versatile animal. And from the earliest days of the King Ranch, Richard King aggressively monitored the breeding of the ranch horse. From this foundation came one of the great horse herds in the entire world. With the dedication of Captain King's son-in-law, Robert Justice Clayburgh Sr., and succeeding generations, the King Ranch continues to make major contributions to quarter horses throughout the world with their genetic makeup. The King Ranch horses that we know today have been greatly influenced by the genetic makeup of Old Sorrel. His grandson, Wimpy P1, as we all know, was the first horse registered in the AQHA. Pep-Up, but Macanudo, was another Old Sorrel grandson that greatly influenced the world of cutting, reining, and cow horses through his daughters, and especially the dam of Mr. Sam Pepe and Pepe San. Another grandson of Old Sorrel was Ranchero by Solis. Ranchero was the sire of Ray Del Rancho, who was the sire of Ray J. Ray J had an interesting life. He was sold as a yearling to Lloyd Jenkins of Fort Worth in a load of colts, and somewhere along the way, he hurt his eye, left permanent damage to a tear duct. He was often referred to as the one-eyed cutting horse. Buster Welch said that Ray J was the tryingest horse he ever rode. As a result of his eye injury, Ira White was able to trade 6 Holstein heifers for Ray J. He took him to renowned horseman Lanham Riley to train, and then later Curly Talmadge paid $350 for him. And when Curly started showing him, he noticed that the horse would keep his head down close to the ground. And one day he started missing cattle pretty bad, and Curly said, I got off of him and looked at him, and he was blinking at me. And I realized the dust had gotten into his bad eye, and it was hurting him. And after consulting with several veterinarians and spending quite a bit of money, Curly found out that a $3 set of racing goggles solved the problem. And so he showed Ray J with this set of goggles for the rest of his life with the side cut out for the good eye. Curly just happened to buy an unregistered mare from Ira White, named her Georgia Cody, after Ira's wife, Georgia. He bred the mare to Ray J, and the result of that breeding was a mare he named Gay J. The mare was sold several times before she wound up in the mare barn at the Phillips Ranch in Frisco, Texas. In later years, Marion Flint of Midland purchased the mare at BF's sale for $17,500. When bred to Marion Flint's stallion Jules Leo Bars, a grandson of both Leo and Three Bars, she produced legendary offspring Freckles Playboy, Freckles Hustler, and Freckles Pleasure. Curly Talmadge then sold Ray J to Tom Lee of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mr. Lee later sold the horse to Marion Flint over in Midland, Texas. Mr. Flint bred Ray J to some of his Sugar Bars and Leo bred mares, as well as some mares he had purchased. And the female offspring of that breeding program crossed on Jules Leo Bar, produced such superstars as Freckles Flint and Colonel Freckles, just to name a couple. Ray J lived out his last years at the Texas A&M School of Veterinary Medicine in College, Texas. The genetics of Old Sorrel continues to influence our performance horses. For example, Two-Eyed Jack has produced unbelievable performance horses with a multitude of talents in the show ring, the rodeo arena, and ranch work. Two-Eyed Jack is a great-great-grandson of Old Sorrel, and out of a granddaughter, a gray badger, too. Two-Eyed Jack is an all-time leading sire of AQHA champions. He sired 119 champions, 16 AQHA world champions, 3 AQHA supreme champions, and 242 performance of merit earners. So Old Sorrel continues to have a drastic effect on the genetics of the quarter horse breed. A horse that developed a dynasty in the hill country brush was King P234 by Xantanon. 1937, Jess Hankins paid $800 for the 5-year-old stallion. Everybody thought he was crazy. 1937, $1 was as big as a wagon wheel. But his produce as a sire allowed Mr. Hankins to charge $15 for a stud fee. Now, that was when he purchased the horse, and by the time King P234 died, the stud fee was $2,500. The descendants of King P234 excelled on the racetrack as well as in the show ring and the rodeo arena. One of his famous sons was Pocobueno, purchased by E. Paul Wagner, the Wagner Ranch near Vernon in 1945 for $5,700. That was a big chunk of money in '45. Pocobueno became one of the most sought-after sires of his time, and he was the first quarter horse in history to be insured for $100,000. Pocobueno died in 1969, and Mr. Wagner left instructions in his will that the horse was to be buried standing up in a grave across from the ranch entrance. The plot of ground was landscaped, and a granite marker weighing 4 tons contains his name, picture, and an inscription. In 1940, near Lexington, Kentucky, a thoroughbred colt was born that was destined to be the major force in quarter horse racing and in competition in a way that no other horse has contributed to the world of working horses, arena competitors, and cutting horses. From 1940 to 1988, 287 quarter horses were crowned racing champions. 55 of those were by Three Bars, his sons and grandsons. In 1967, the AQHA introduced the Supreme Champion Awards, and through 1984, 44 horses earned that award, and 20 recipients of the Supreme Champion Award went to descendants of Three Bars and 4 awards went to his own get. 3 Bars was one of 4 horses chosen to be inducted in the new AQHA Hall of Fame. In 1947, Sid Vale bought the horse and stood him for $100 with very few takers. By 1955, the fee went to $5,000 and later to $10,000. He died of a massive heart attack in April of 1968 at the age of 28. Almost every champion from racing to cutting carries the blood of 3 Bars in his or her pedigree. Outside the racing world, probably the most famous grandson of 3 Bars was born in California in 1956. A son of lightning bars by 3 Bars, he was destined to revolutionize the world of cutting. His list of offspring looks like the AQHA Honor Roll of Champions. His genetics have dominated a large part of the cutting industry for generations. His descendants continue to excel in the rodeo arena, the cutting pen, and on the vast ranches of the West. And then every once in a while, an individual comes along that changes the game for everyone, be it a person or a horse. One of the most productive sires in the AQHA was born April the 17th, 1973 at the Phillips Ranch in Frisco, Texas. Bubba Cassio was training all of the Phillips horses, and he tells us this story. In 1974, we got all of our yearlings went in and went through them, looked at them, decided we'd keep Wendy Ryan as a stud. Wendy Ryan was really the only one that looked like stud material at that time, and he later sired the earners of $5.2 million. Dash looked like a big old gangly thoroughbred, and we were going to cut him along with the rest. Well, that night there was a thunderstorm. Thundering and lightning and raining, it got the colts to running around, and Dash for Cash ran into a fence and tore open his shoulder. The cut didn't get down into the meat much, Bubba said, but just ripped the skin. We sewed it up. We got ready to cut the other colts, and Dash's shoulder still wasn't quite healed up, still had some stitches, so we didn't want to throw him down to gild him. We were afraid it'd bust open that shoulder, so we decided we'd cut him later and go ahead and start breaking him. He said the first time I tacked him up, Dash still had those old dried up stitches. I just cut them out and we went on with him, still planning on cutting him when we had time. The first time we let him down, Jerry Nicodemus came back. His face looked like it'd been sandblasted and he couldn't get his breath. I knew right then we had a runner. I called BF and said, I don't think you want to cut this one. But the only thing that kept us from cutting him to begin with was that shoulder. If he hadn't busted it, Dash for Cash would have been a gelding. Now, you breed a good horse to a good mare, you're going to get a good horse. And if you breed a race horse to a cutting mare, you'd get a horse like Missing Cash. The proof that a good bred horse is a good horse regardless of where you put him. Dash for Cash, a racehorse, was bred to a daughter of Doc Bar. His offspring continue to excel in reined horse competition, the cutting arena, and working cow horse classes. And Missing Cash is a great champion all his own. So the blood of great horses continues to work in all disciplines, and some are specialized, but most of them are just good all-around horses. You know, the world of cutting horse racing would still be vibrant and exciting without the influence of Dash for Cash, but it would certainly be different. The same way that the world of cutting without the genes of Doc Bar would still be an unbelievable event, we were so grateful for the contributions of both Doc Bar and Dash for Cash. When I was growing up in that old river country of the Panhandle of Texas along the Canadian River, there were 2 things that we were taught at a very early age. One was ride for the brand. If you hire out to a man and he signs your paycheck and you're using his money to improve your lifestyle, ride for his brand. We used to go out to the Wagners between New Year's and Christmas, and Mr. Wagner built an old lodge out there in the 1920s or 30s. And we'd go out and stay in that old lodge and hunt hogs and waterfowl and deer, turkey, just have a wonderful time. And the cowboys would come out on Saturday evening to partake of our free whiskey and sandwiches and play penny ante poker. And one night, they're sitting around the table and they're talking about the brand this and the brand that. And I was intrigued with the way they talked about the brand because all of my life, ride for the brand was burned in my brain. Jimmy Patterson was a wagon boss at the time, and he said, you know, guys, those are our cattle. The family gets the money, but we calve them out. We keep watch on them. We doctor them. We make sure they have plenty of feed. Those are our cattle. They belong to us. And I thought, what a wonderful, wonderful thought for that group of cowboys to feel that way. And then I looked over in the corner, and there was a fellow sitting there who couldn't hear it thunder but was grinning from ear to ear. He'd lived in that camp for 42 years by himself. And I thought if anybody ever rode for the brand, Paul Whitley rode for the brand. When he first went out to Cedar Top, he stayed in an old tin shed. All he had was just one little water trough and a cement floor and tin walls, nothing between him and the north wind but about that much tin. And he stayed there by himself. I went out on the porch of that old lodge, and I wrote this poem in Paul Whitley's honor. His skin looked like leather, he walked with a limp and talked with a slow Texas drawl. His knuckles were knotted and his right thumb was gone, said a stud bit it off late last fall, but hey, we knew he was lying. We'd watched him dally it up. But it ain't healthy to call him a liar. It is Saturday night before the wagon went out, and he is setting our new kid on fire. We've all heard his stories about places he's been, and we think that Jake's kind of strange. He looked over at me and said, I'm schooling this boy about the unwritten laws of the range. And the kid was enthralled, kind of like in a trance. Jake sensed that he had a good grip, so he straightened up, hitched his pants, took a drink of cold beer, turned around with his hand on his hips, and he said, son, a man's brand is his own special mark. It says, this is mine, leave it alone. If you hire out to a man, ride for his brand and protect it like it was your own. Said, Mr. Wagner come out here in 1903. This country was sagebrush, mesquite trees, and sand, and he carved him this ranch out of blood, sweat, and guts. Be proud that you ride for his brand. If you hired out to string barbed wire, build him a fence. It don't matter if it's 4 or 5 strand. Just remember it was you who asked for the job. Don't bitch when you ride for this brand. And Mr. Wagner don't hold with complainers. He'll fire one before he can quit. If you don't like our outfit, head down the trail and find a horse that your saddle will fit. But if you get up early, catch your own bronc, show the boss that you're making a hand, Mr. Wagner will be there to cover your bets as long as you ride for his brand. He said, the winter I spent at the Sixes, we had a man at the old Taylor place who rode up on some hiders a skinning a cow and squared off at them scamps face to face. Now, he could have rode off, never looked back, but he wasn't that kind of man, and we found him in Ash Creek, shot all to hell. No Kona Joe died for the brand. Well, we know the old man tells a windy or two, like the one about losing his thumb, and No Kona was killed in a bar in Fort Worth with the demons and a bottle of rum. But I got to thinking about what he had said, and the more of it I understand, the more I believe we'd be all better off if more people would ride for the brand. But and of course, we ride for the AQHA brand. I will tell you one more story. I heard about a fella up in Amarillo. You know, we still have some knife and gun clubs up there, don't we, Don? Where when you check in the door, they'll ask you if you got a knife or a gun, and if you don't, they'll loan you one. Yeah. Oh, I grew up in them, but this fellow was sitting in a corner of this knife and gun club, and the bartender yelled, "What can I do for you?" Well, this guy knew who he was talking to because he was the only one in there, and he said, "I need 3 beers. I want you to pop the top on all 3 of them at the same time." The bartender said, "That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Let me pop them one at a time. They won't lose their fizz and go flat on you. This fellow said, no, you don't understand. My brothers and I are scattered. I live in Amarillo, one's in Midland, one's in Houston, and we made a deal when we left home we would never drink alone. We'd all three drink together. We're going to drink together. So the bartender brought him those 3 beers, and he'd take a drink of this one, drink of this one, drink of this, and make that same rotation till all the beers were empty. A couple of weeks later, he came from the door, he yelled, bartender, bring me them 3 beers, and pop a top on all 3 of them. Bartender didn't argue with him, brought him the beers. About a week later, from the door, he yells, bartender, I need 2 beers, and pop a top on both of them. The bartender thought, my goodness, he's lost one of his brothers. How do I handle this? Took the 2 beers over and set them down. He said, I'm terribly sorry about your loss. He said, loss? I ain't lost nothing. Oh, you talking about the 2 beers? That ain't no big deal. My wife got us tangled up with them church people, and I'm no longer allowed to drink. Oh, I was telling you a while ago about the 2 things that I learned. The other one was be the kind of man to ride the river with. The quicksand in the Canadian River when I was growing up, before they built the dam, would move. You didn't necessarily cross going out in the morning and come back that same place. You watched for cattle tracks. If they went in and came back out, you knew there was quicksand in there. If they went across the water and out the other side, then you can cross there. But you might not be able to cross there in the evening. So you wanted somebody with you. You wanted to be on a good horse that you could depend on, who had a good mind, but you wanted somebody riding with you that you could depend on. And that's the kind of man to ride the river with. And all of my life, my goal in my whole world was to be the kind of man to ride the river with. I got this story from my dear friend Ben Johnson and an Oklahoma cowboy named Joe Crow. And Joe told me the story about when Will James and Wiley Post took off from the airport in Oklahoma City. And I couldn't get away from him fast enough. This poem, I just saw the whole picture. I stood by the fountain as they brought him out, a lost, lonely look on his face. I ain't never seen him in nothing but boots. The wheelchair sure seemed out of place. It took him a while to recall who I am. Then confusion broke into a grin. It was though we were saddled up, ready to ride the hackberry pasture again. He laughed as he said, I remember the time that yeller bronc swallowed his head and pitched you so high that you turned over twice. Me and Benny Bob swore you was dead. He looked up at me and said, how is old Ben? I lied and said he's doing fine. No need to remind him his brother was gone. Ben died back in '79. For most of an hour, we rode at a trot. We branded and shaped up the steers, drank gallons of coffee, ate sourdough bread, and cowboyed for 51 years. I thought he was an old man when I was a kid. At a time when I needed a friend, he took me to raise, taught me all that I know about horses and cattle and men. See, my daddy had died and I needed a job. I was big for a kid of 15. So they put me to work on the 4-6's ranch. I was dumb as a gourd and as green. We was looking for strays in the Wichita breaks. It was me and John Gaither and him. I'd lost sight of John. I was looking around kind of daydreaming there on the rim and rode up on some cattle hid out in the brush. A 2-year-old steer come by me, throwed a 9 in his tail and cut a new trail right out through them salt cedar trees. Boy, I lit out behind him a-giving her hell. This colt I was riding was green, but I thought to myself, he ain't getting away. This roan is a running machine. We was going full bore when we got to the bank. The stream wasn't wide as my hat. I almost pulled up. Then I thought, what the hell, I've jumped rivers wider than that. Well, I bogged that old pony plumb up to his gut. He was wallering and thrashing around and going down deeper with each desperate lunge, and me praying he'd find solid ground. Then just at the moment that I heard his voice, a rope appeared right by the roan. Get out of that cack and hang on to my line. The colt will get out on his own. I've crossed that old river many a time. found me a bog once or twice. But I still remember a 30-foot rope and a good cowboy piece of advice. When you ride that river, son, make sure your horse is gentle and seasoned as well, 'cause only the good uns will get you across. That quicksand goes clean down to hell. I got up to leave, and he reached for my hand. He said, "Son, I'm sure glad you dropped by. If you see old Ben, have him saddle my horse. I hate sitting waiting to die." His voice started cracking. He swallowed. Said, "I'm nearing the end of my ride, but if I cross the river before you get there, I'll leave a good horse on this side." We leave good horses on this side. We leave the horses of honesty and integrity and loyalty and work ethic, dedication to family, conviction about our belief in God, and the practice of common decency and respect for our fellow man every day we live. That's the kind of world we live in. We live in the world of horses, in the world of kindness and gentleness and harmonious. You know, without a harmonious society, it's not much fun, but we make it harmonious because we believe in all those things I just talked about. We leave good horses. In the beginning of our breed association, the working horses were the forefront of our breeding program. And as we look back on the gene pool created by our foundation sires, just to name a few, Hollywood Gold, Gray Badger 2, King P234, Old Sorrel, 3 Bars, Wimpy P1, Poco Bueno, Bill Cody, Leo Impressive. We can go on and on and on. We realize how important the blood of these horses and others like them will continue to influence our breed. However, as we remember those great horses and their contributions, we look forward to the future and the influence of the great bloodlines that we've created since the beginning of our association. The AQHA is truly in great hands and will continue to enthrall future generations thanks to you. So let's ride for the AQHA brand, and let's make sure that we are the kind of people to ride the river with. Our association is going to continue to grow, and the wonderful world of quarter horses will continue to be the greatest world on the face of this earth. God bless all of you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
This was supposed to be a surprise, but he got his badge and it had life member on it, so he's up to something. We were too efficient in the office. Red, on behalf of AQHA's members, we greatly appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. Peter just gave you a very special gift, that of an honorary life membership in the American Quarter Horse Association. This special award can be given to parties who merit special recognition for their individual efforts at the national and international level in furtherance of the aims and objectives of AQHA. You're certainly a very worthy recipient. Thank you very much. Congratulations for all you do for our industry and our lifestyle. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Don. Deeply honored. Thank you.